You are welcome to, if you do not want to be on the Elisabeth Kubler-Ross website, their YouTube, you're welcome to turn off your video, though it is awfully nice to see your faces when we're showing the videos. So a couple of things I just want to say about the foundation and the event tonight. Please feel free in the chat. Hello, Gordon. Please feel free in the chat to put your, where it is you're chatting in from. I know there's people coming to join us from around the country and often from around the world. So thank you all for being here. A couple of things about the meeting. We're going to have you muted. There's Ken Ross. Thank you, Ken. I'll introduce you in just a moment. And we're going to keep you unmuted. We just want to make sure that people just are paying attention to keeping yourself muted. And Barbara is going to talk. I'm going to introduce both the foundation and Barbara, and then Barbara is going to, Ken will probably say just a hello to everybody. And then Barbara will join us and talk about her newest book. Yes, we have a lot of Barbara Karnes fans in our audience tonight. And we'll have about 45 minutes, maybe an hour of Barbara, and then there's going to be time for Q&A, and we can talk after Barbara's done speaking about any questions you have and how to raise your hand in a Zoom meeting if you're unfamiliar with that. You're also welcome to put in any questions in the chat, and it's easy for me to follow them if you start it either with a Q or question and then what your question is, and then I can read those for those of you that might be too shy to say this out loud. This is being recorded, and you will get a recording link that will go up on the Elisabeth Kubler-Ross Foundation's YouTube channel, hopefully within the next 4 or 5 days. I don't want to put, Ken's giving me the signal for 3. So Ken will be getting this up. That's his job. And Ken, do you want to go ahead? Normally, I just kind of introduce the foundation from what's up on the website, but do you want to just say a couple of words about the foundation? And thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Susan. It's a pleasure to be here. Normally, I don't show up just because I have so many things going on and I'm traveling. But I wanted to say a special welcome to Barbara. She's, one of the great ones in our industry, in our area of field. So we appreciate everything she's doing to make this a better place for all of us. And, we're on a long journey here that Elisabeth began back in the 60s, and we're still at it, and we'll be at it for another 50 years. But, yeah, we're getting there. So anyway, I just wanted to say the foundation has been going on now for 17 years. We've got chapters in approximately a dozen countries, a lot of things happening in Latin America. We're starting a respite center. We've initiated some hospice programs, and we've given Elisabeth's archives to Stanford University, and we're building a digital library for all of you to research Elisabeth's original writings from the 60s and 70s and 80s. And a lot of interesting things going on. We're working on a feature film, documentaries. We've got all Mom's videos finally digitized after a very long, decade-long process. So a lot of work out there to research and make available to you in English and Spanish. So anyway, I'll just leave it at that, and I'll turn it over to Susan and Barbara, and thank you all for joining us and spending part of your day with us.
Thank you so much, Ken. And I'm going to introduce Barbara now. Barbara, I'm going to just drop you down here. I'm hoping people are able to see the spotlighting and to see the both of us here together. I am going to introduce Barbara, whose work I've known about since my first day in hospice, when somebody handed me what we called the Little Blue Book, which is officially called. It took me probably a year before I realized, oh, it's gone from my site. It's not called the Little Blue Book, but I would imagine that pretty much most people anywhere in hospice, the hospice world, have come across, gone from my site, or a plagiarized version of that, which they call the Little Blue Book. So Barbara has continued to write and inform people about end-of-life care in such a beautiful way. What I appreciate the most about Barbara's booklets are that they are written in a way, the last thing a caregiver or a person who's really ill wants to do is pick up a gigantic book about death, dying, loss, and grief and spend hours reading through it to find the information they want. Hopefully they've done that years in advance of actually needing the information. But Barbara's books you can pick up and go through really just so beautifully and so quickly that you get all of the information. I know We had many nurses that would give Gone From My Sight to their patients and their families. And the next week they'd come back and go, I was so worried because my mother wasn't eating, but look on page blah, this is what's supposed to happen. She's doing just what's supposed to happen. The amount of relief experienced both by the families and the patients was enormous. Barbara also has gotten all sorts of honors of every kind, well-deserved. And at this point, Barbara, if you're okay, I'd like to just turn this over to you. You're welcome to continue to introduce yourself. I think you were the 2015 International Woman of the Year, something close to that award. And Barbara is also, through her generosity, she is frequently presenting with Gabby Jimenez for the Elisabeth Kubler-Ross Foundation, and they will be speaking together on December 6th at 10 a.m. And I will put that event up soon. That is my 65th birthday. And I was so happy when they agreed to do the talk on that day together, because I can't think of better people I'd like to start my day with that day. So hope to see you all there, Barbara. I'm going to remove myself here, and please take the floor.
Okay.
For the Zoom.
Thank you for inviting me. It's always in my heart, the work that the Elisabeth Kubler-Ross Foundation does. And I am honored to be part of that. And thank you very much. I was trying to figure out where to start with this since it's author night. So I'm going to start with that material which you know, and I thought maybe you'd be interested in some of the backstory to Gone From My Sight. And I'm a registered nurse. For those of you that don't know, I started in 1981 as a primary care hospice nurse. I did study a week with Elisabeth, went out to her Shantae workshop for a week so that I could learn how to take care of people who were dying. What's interesting about that, I got there with my notebook and I'm ready to learn. And she said, put away the notebooks. We're going to learn about ourselves first. Before you can help someone else, you have to know who you are. And we spent a week exploring ourselves. Amazing, life-changing week. So that's just a little tidbit. I didn't even have that in my notes. So registered nurse, started as a primary care nurse for 5 years. And it was at a time when hospice was outside of the medical model. Our medical model teaches that death is a failure and that it's the enemy and that you fight it at all costs. Well, hospice started over here outside of the model and said, wait a minute, everybody dies. The body is made to die. You're born, you experience, and you die. And so let's treat and work with the person and their personhood as they are dying. So when I look back, it was those 5 years that taught me everything I know about end of life, because I was at the bedside of hundreds of people, not only just before they died, but at the moment of death. And they taught me everything I know. So one night I was on call, 3 o'clock in the morning. The goblins always come out at 3 o'clock in the morning. And the thing I learned really fast was if you don't roll out of bed and go to the house, even if you think you can handle it on the phone, if you don't show up, you're going to wake up in the morning and your patient's going to be in the ER at 7 o'clock in the morning. So 3 o'clock, I'm with this family and mom's in labor, but it's 1 to 3 weeks before death. She's not imminent. And I'm sitting in the family room with the family and I'm explaining to them the signs of approaching death. I want them to know that what mom's doing is normal, that she's doing what you do to get out of your body. And one of the daughters was taking notes. And I thought, oh my goodness, she shouldn't have to take notes. And so that weekend, and this is before computers, yellow legal pads, which, I sat on my sofa that weekend and I wrote what I wanted my families to know. I wanted it no medicalese. I wanted it short, simple, yet gentle. And so I wrote Gone From My Sight. And that's what it is: short, simple, gentle. But the key is that it shows families that nothing bad is happening. It's sad, but mom's doing what she's supposed to be doing. So that's Gone From My Sight. I used to get letters, still get letters, but I got letters from people that said, Mom died, Gone From My Sight was wonderful, and now I want 5 more Gone From My Sight. And I thought, wait a minute, they don't need Gone From My Sight, they need a grief booklet. And so I wrote My Friend I Care, which isn't everything that was ever written about grief, but it's enough to get a family started about normal grief. So hospice over the years has changed, and where my focus was the moment of death. That was my goal. That was when I wanted to be there. That everything I did before the death, everything led up to the moment of death. And following the death, then in the bereavement aspect, everything led down to independence. All right, so there was this arc. And for many, many reasons, many families are alone now at the moment of death when their loved one dies. And I thought, this is not, people don't die like they do in the movies. And so families think that what mom's doing is pathological, and they don't know what to do. So I wrote The 11th Hour. So where Gone From My Sight says to the family, here's what's happening, and mom's doing it right. The 11th Hour says, here's what you do while it's happening. All right, so that's The 11th Hour. A little bit longer because I couldn't get it all in 13 pages, but I think it's like 20 something. So it's still an easy read, and these two go together. The other thing I get a lot from families is pain. Taking care of someone at end of life is different than taking care of someone who's going to get better. But most people don't know that. And so end of life work is judged by how people get better unless we teach them otherwise. And 90% of our work with end of life is education. And one of the most confusing, misunderstood areas of end of life is pain. And what I'll say in just a couple of words is that dying is not painful. Disease causes pain. And so you're going to look at a person's disease history. And if they have a history of pain, then you're going to do whatever you need to keep them comfortable until their last breath. But there's a lot of diseases that don't cause pain. And so when you look at their disease history, if it's one of no pain, then just because they're dying doesn't mean they're now in pain. If pain isn't an issue and you're in the labor, the 1 to 3 weeks, what your body is feeling and will increase feeling is tired, heavy, ache all over. Well, if it's like you had the flu, and I don't mean COVID. So if you had the flu, you wouldn't take a narcotic. You take a couple of ibuprofen. And so I think there is a time when maybe a couple of ibuprofen is appropriate, but you don't have to bring in the narcotic if pain is not part of the disease history. So I wrote Pain at End of Life because it's different. And so that families will understand. I can't say enough. 90% of our work is education because we don't have any role models on how people die. The other recent booklet that I've written is one on dementia. Hospice is taking on more and more patients with dementia, and dementia doesn't play by the rules. Gone From My Sight has the rules that people follow when they're dying, not dementia. So it isn't until a person can't eat that the signs of approaching death kick in. So I wrote a booklet to guide families that are dealing with dementia. I'm looking at the clock. I'm doing okay, right? Yes? All right. So my newest book is By Your Side. And it is a book where my others, you could almost call them a booklet because they're like 13, 14 pages. This isn't real long. I think there's what, 60 pages, large print. I got some really cool pictures, drawings in here, which an interesting side note is that we contacted an artist in Ukraine and she drew the pictures that you'll see. This is, I don't know if you can see it. This is me and Baxter. Those of you that follow me on Facebook know Baxter. In fact, he's right over here. Well, we sent her a picture and said, let's put in Baxter. So lovely artwork. And that was our way of personally helping someone over in Ukraine. Why did I write this? Let's start with that. Last year, my husband got really sick. He wasn't dying, but you don't know that for sure when you're 88 years old. And I became the primary caregiver. I'm a professional nurse. I have for how many years worked on the professional nursing side of healthcare. And all of a sudden, I'm the caregiver. And it was such an eye opener. I'm embarrassed to say I had no idea what caregivers were going through till I had to walk in their shoes. Most of the attention goes to the patient. You know, if you got someone on hospice, or even if they're not on hospice, we concentrate our energy on the patient. And the caregiver is invisible and they're doing all the work. I was amazed, and this makes me look bad, but at how hard it was to be a caregiver, not just the 24/7 you're on, literally, the not being able to sleep for 8 hours or even 6 hours at a time, the being alone, the fear of what's going to happen, all of those for me were holy smoke. I had no idea. So after he got better last year, I decided I want to focus on the non-medical caregiver. I want to give them some support and guidance and recognition for what they're doing. A minute ago, I said taking care of someone at the end of life is different than taking care of someone who's going to get better, but that most people don't know it? Your caregiver doesn't. Most caregivers don't know it. They're working to get this person better, even if they've been told dad's not going to get better. So I focused on caregivers who are dealing with end of life issues. So where I started with is I got to teach these caregivers what's going to happen, what to expect. So aside from an introduction, I go into funeral planning. Actually, I start off with advanced directives, because if you're being a caregiver, you need to know what your patient, what your loved one, what the person you're caring for wants and doesn't want. And so I'm focusing on advanced directives and then funeral planning. And it's unpleasant, but we've got to deal with it, get it out of the way, it's done. So I address those issues in this booklet, and that's where I start. Just so you know what I'm doing when I look down. I didn't want to forget anything, so I made notes. The key thing that I learned, aside from non-medical caregivers are not prepared and that they have no idea, is that being invisible, getting lost in the picture of all that they're doing, is that they stop taking care of themselves. They stop meeting their own needs, and that everything comes before them. Everything is focused on their loved one who is needing their care. And so they put their own needs and oftentimes their own life over here on hold. And you can only do that so long. The patient often becomes like the spoiled child. And we think that we have to give them everything that they want, to the detriment of our own needs. And so I address that in that you're important and you're vital to taking care of this person. And if you don't take care of yourself, you won't be able to do this work. I will say to you, and it's not in the book, but I had patients that I have taken care of where the caregiver died first because the caregiver was absolutely exhausted and worn out, and the only way they could have peace, literally, was to die. And I'm not saying they killed themselves. I'm saying their body gave out and they died. Well, I don't want that to happen to any caregiver. And I didn't put that in the book, but I can share that with you. And I will say that there's a whole chapter on how to take care of yourself, how to put your own oxygen mask on first. And we caregivers don't think about that. You know, they aren't eating right, they're not sleeping, everything is for the patient. And I'm saying, no, 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 no. You know, you've got to take care of yourself so that you can continue to take care of your special person. And how do you do that, aside from eating and sleeping, is you don't have to do it alone. You've got to find other people, other resources to help you. And that may be the neighbor that comes in, or bring in the kid, your adult children, to help. The whole family needs to help and support you. And it's not just saying, gee, thanks, Mom, for doing this for Dad, but it's, Mom, I'm coming over and I'm going to be here this weekend. And you go to a movie, maybe you just want to go to bed and go to sleep. It can be the neighbor that brings lunch over, or the neighbor that comes over and says, you know, it's Sunday morning. You want to go to church? I'm going to stay here. We need a support group around us. And we need a listener. And I think no one even thinks about a listener. But we need one person in our life that we can call on the phone and say, or Zoom with, and say, oh my God, you wouldn't believe what just happened. And download so that you don't carry it. This person, this listener isn't going to have the answers. You aren't expecting answers. You just need to get it out and verbalize and have one person that you're safe with, that you can do that with. I also put in here one of the things that I kind of knew, but I didn't really think deeply about it. I used to fill out for my families, for the patients' families, I would create a little worksheet and I'd have their medicines on it and the times. And I'd say, now when he pees, I want you to put down that he's peed. If he's pooped, put that down. As a caregiver, I learned that my memory was gone. You know, if you ask me, what did you feed him for breakfast? And it's 8 o'clock at night, I wouldn't be able to tell you. So I created a worksheet that I included in here, which I recommend is used every day. And it's got basics, but it also has, what did you do today for you? You know, I addressed the caregiver and tried to keep them focused on taking care of themselves, as well as filling out and taking care of their loved one. So it is 6:30. What I thought I would do, and then we'll just open this up to questions. And I really hope that you'll ask me anything. I talk about anything. I don't care what it is, just ask. So, but what I thought I would do is just to give you a sense of the energy that I'm trying to guide the caregiver in. As in all my work, it's 5th grade level, it's large print, it's gentle, but I'm hoping it's thought-provoking too. And I thought, how am I going to end this after I've talked about funeral planning and all the medical equipment you need and how you can get it, and how do you take care of oxygen and Foley catheters, all this stuff. But I didn't want to just end the book just like that. I wanted some comfort, which is what I've done with all my materials. I have a poem. Every booklet ends in a poem because I want to send you on your way with some gentleness and some love. So I thought this isn't very long, and I thought I'd read it to you because I like it. All right. James Dillett Freeman wrote a book years ago titled Love, Loved, Loving. In the book, he tells the story of a king who dies, and upon his death meets an angel who invites him to reflect on his life. The angel asks the king to describe the legacy that he left behind. What does the king think were his 3 most important achievements? The king proudly lists his successful stewardship of his kingdom, the vast wealth he built up in the palace coffers, and the adoration he enjoyed from his subjects. These three achievements, in his opinion, comprised the legacy that any man would be proud of. But the angel had a different opinion. While he agrees that these were indeed impressive achievements, they were not the things that truly defined the king. In the eyes of the angel, the three actions that comprise the king's legacy are making love to his wife in the moonlight, sitting with his dying cat at the hearthside, and playing with his grandchild, even though he had other important matters to attend to. Now, this is in different print. Before bed each night, I asked myself, what have I traded a day of my life for? Yesterday, I traded a day of my life to enjoy the bright, shining moon coming in my window, for playing a couple of hours with a 3-year-old and visiting with a friend I hadn't seen in a while. I think it was worth the trade. Caring for someone as they approach the end of their life is a legacy creating moment. My wish for you is that this challenging journey will become a part of that legacy the angel was looking for. Blessings, Barbara. So that's my latest work. I hope that it will be beneficial to a lot of people. How about questions, comments?
Barbara, thank you so much. And thank you, Patty. You know how to put your hand up. So Patty's got her hand up. For those of you that may not be so sure how to do that, if you go to the bottom of or top of your Zoom screen, you may see something that says more, and you can click there. You may see a little smiley face that says reactions. You can click there and there will be a hand that goes like this. The benefit for that is because it shows us the order that you're raising your hand, and it also just lets me know who is interested in asking questions. So Patty, why don't you go ahead? I'm going to bring you down here as an added spotlight person. There you go. Looks like you're having a little conversation. Why don't you go ahead and ask your question, please?
Barbara, my goodness, it's so wonderful to see you, even if it's like a 1x2 little square, but I do feel the love, and I'm so incredibly blessed to share you and everyone here. As I said in the chat, I ordered your booklets, and almost immediately you responded on such a beautiful, authentic level. And I just want to let you know how much I appreciate you and your work and your connection. So my question is, what gets you up in the morning? What's your passion? What's your drive? What drives you to do the work you're doing? I know Elisabeth and many and the Ross, Elisabeth Kubler-Ross Foundation is also very active and all, in your own personal life. But when you wake up and your feet hit the floor, what moves you forward?
Oh, wow, that's a powerful question. I have to kind of think about that for a minute. It's almost feels like this work that I'm doing is what I'm on the planet for. And maybe that's egotistical, I don't know, but it's like, this is why I'm alive. This is what I'm supposed to do, is to educate anyone who will listen. And I look at the 5 years that I was direct patient care, that was school. And that's what taught me what I could then teach. And then I went into administration, and that taught me also what I can teach and how I need to teach by working with people in the industry in hospice. It gave me patients over here, and then employees and the professionals doing the work. So I have both perspectives, but it is education that I feel is my reason for breathing. That sounds a little weird, but yeah, I think that's why I'm here.
I would just like to recognize that what I see in you is a light worker in this very dark world. First of all, an incredible light worker. And I also see an angel in a human body here on earth.
Oh, goodness.
Thank you.
Oh, now I'm going to cry. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Patty. Yeah, so it's second that or third that, Barbara. So looks like you've answered all the questions about end of life because nobody has their hand up. But I do want to just share with you.
Oh, no. Please.
Yes, please, people. And also caregiving experiences. Barbara, when you were talking about your husband being ill and being in that position as a caregiver, I had to put my hand over my mouth because I had just shared earlier a dear friend also to the foundation, Irene Smith, who has been a teacher and teaching touch awareness, kind of responsible for the first prison hospice in the country, a dear friend and student of Elisabeth's for many years. For a reason unbeknownst to me, still asked me if I would be her DPOA at the beginning of 2020. And I said, yes, 2021. And I don't think either of us had any idea that that would be put into use within 10 days. But 10 days later, I got a call from a friend of hers. She was up all night. Kathy, thank you. We'll come right back to you. Thank you for letting me know that. And Lynn, I see your hand up too. So I took that on. I thought I had asked her and spoken about all the things that we should talk about. I was like, I work in hospice. That's kind of my bent. Don't really have a lot to offer you outside of that. If things get really bad, you live by yourself, we could move you to the hospice house. And we thought we were in agreement, but she got very ill. And none of those things were things actually she wanted to stay, of course, in her home of 42 years. And we put together for 9 weeks, 24-hour volunteer caregiving people from hospice. Thank God, I know a lot of hospice people. Zen caregiving program sent a lot of their volunteers. It was absolutely exhausting. And I say quite, I've gotten done being embarrassed about it. I tell people I've trained volunteers for decades. And I tell them all, when this is happening in your own family, you can take this binder and you can throw it right out your car window because you are just the daughter, the son, the spouse, the parent of somebody who's dying. And all of that information may be helpful and supportive, and it may not. And either way, you're still going to be the person that's caring for this other person. So, get the help you need, find the people that can support you. And I tell people, I feel like I failed my final on end of life care after 35 years. I should know more. I should have been calmer with Irene. And I just think, we're human beings, and this is a very difficult road to hoe for ourselves, for a family member, and doing it for a friend is, there's even more complications. So I 1000% relate to what you're saying, and I can't wait to see the book. The part about self-care, I have been to 2 homes where the patient's caregiver died while we were caring for them in a hospice program. One who had just literally walked in the door, finally agreeing with the nurse he should go to his cardiologist, clean bill of health, walked through the door and died on the floor. And his wife had been ill with Alzheimer's for more than 8 years. It was we called his son, he came over right away. The nurse and social worker came. They both were very close with him. And that's why I went the volunteer coordinator, because I was like, somebody needs to support them. And that man's son called me 9 years later. I was shocked to hear from him. He said, I just want to tell you that my mom died. I was like, when? He said, last week. I'm like, your mother lived for another 9 years. Wow. And he said, I think about my dad every day. I don't know how he did this at all. And he did it because he did nothing for himself for all of that time. So your advice, your sage advice for caregivers, if you want to outlive the person you're caring for, is you have to be able to care for yourself. And what happened in that family once that man died, it was, was extraordinary, but so much more difficult for the son. He was a single person, a single child, and just so much more difficult for him to have to do that without his dad. And so for people like carers, who are typically the people that show up in these rooms, and taking care of ourselves is put in the back burner, that I think will be the biggest change that people can make in order, to have a as positive as possible caregiving experience. So thank you for saying that out loud.
Well,
Kathy?
wait.
Yep.
One of the big differences between the work that we do as professionals working in end of life is, as a caregiver, you've got more work, obviously, but you've got the emotional involvement.
Yeah.
And so that heart that we're operating from blocks and fogs up everything that we're doing. As much as I want to make sure he doesn't hear me, as much as I love my husband, I thought if I hear about his bowels one more time, I'm going to scream. And I mean, it's that emotional involvement that caregivers, when they feel that energy, that irritation, then they think there's something wrong with them when it's normal and natural. And so I dealt with that.
Thank you so much. So why don't we have Kathy, because I can't see you, Kathy, and then Lynn, and then Marcy. We're going to come back for the two of you. Kathy, can you, let me see if I can find you here. I want to spotlight you. Why don't you go ahead and unmute yourself? And is that you, Kathleen Bates? Okay, perfect. I found you. Here you go. And why don't you go ahead? Thank you.
Well, first of all, Barbara, I want to thank you for writing the little blue book. I've been giving it away for over 25 years. And I've worked with two incredible palliative care and hospice doctors, and spent 30 years helping people die as a social worker in skilled nursing. But let's see if I can do this. This is my first time in attending like a workshop since my husband died in March. And it was an incredible journey to become vulnerable to ask for help. And I would say that you are so right about the caregiving. I've been a caregiver all my life since I was the oldest of 7. But one doesn't know the depth of the grief that you experience, not only going through and sometimes feeling like you're just in slow motion, and trying to also please all the people around you, help all the people around you. I am very fortunate that, as well as being a social worker and a mental health specialist, and I'm an end-of-life doula, that here in Seattle, I have a group that's called the Gentle Passage Doula Collective. And asking for help, which was very difficult for me. But these women were doulas that came at 10, 11 o'clock at night and stayed for 4 and 5 hours so that I could sleep. But this whole piece about self-care is very, very challenging. I also have a private practice as an end-of-life doula. And I want to share with you that the getting back to work and doing that practice is actually life-giving to me, because I don't think you'll see I'm silly, but it is, it's giving my life joy to do for others, despite the fact that I'm still in a grieving process. So I wanted to say thank you so much for that, and that helping us realize how important caregiving for self is, because basically we have been taught not to care for ourselves. And it is probably the biggest task I have, and allowing one yourself to be vulnerable to ask for help is quite something else. So there's not a question in there, but it is this remarkable process that I went through for over 6 months with my husband, who we didn't expect to even have all these events happen to him. And oftentimes that has happened. And the greatest gift that he gave me, basically the last time he talked, was to say, I love you. And it was really quite remarkable and an amazing gift. And I would say that's what we need to continue to do, just as you read that one piece of literature about loving, love, 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 because we never know what tomorrow will bring. Thank you for letting me share.
Oh, thank you for sharing. Thank you so much. Blessings to you. Keep up. I'm just down the road from you. I'm in Vancouver, Washington.
Oh, for
so,
God's sakes.
yeah, we're neighbors. We're neighbors.
Thank you again.
Hey, Lynn, I'm going to bring you on down here, and if you would like to unmute yourself, please.
Sure. First of all, I too would like to thank you, Barbara, because I found your booklets are just brilliant, because you're short, you're concise, your everyday language. People can read it and easily understand it. I totally agree with everything. This new book is really, I can't wait to order it and get it in my home. I too recently, my husband experienced a intracranial bleed, and in May, and found myself not exactly 24/7 because we have long-term care insurance, but a lot. And it is really very, very different to be the caregiver for somebody that you care about in your life, and to understand professionally what that person is going through, but still feel like you're on. You're always on. You know, going to the bathroom is a big deal. Whether they say it or not, you feel like you need to do it immediately. And you're right. The self-care goes out the window, and really truly understanding. You know, as a professional, I thought I understood the caregiver role much as you said in the beginning. But being a caregiver for somebody that you care about is an entirely different experience. Years ago, I fractured my kneecap, and it was a good experience. I'm a nurse. I was a hospice nurse. I've always worked with end of life patients, even before hospice. And I know, you know, we know to try to be sensitive and watch body language. Do we offer help to somebody that's with a walker, or do we not? The being on the other side of the fence and knowing I couldn't run across the street, knowing was I going to be able to open that door? My parents coming out and saying you have to eat, and actually lost weight because I had to eat more for them, and then I had to make more trips to the bathroom. But you know, you're addressing all those issues, and especially stopping and taking care of yourself is just. It seems like it's so elementary, but it is so vital, and it's such a wonderful, wonderful observation. And thank you for all of the pathways that you've opened up for all of the people. And as a hospice nurse, first thing you're asked when you're admitting a patient is, how long do you think it'll be? That is the number one question if you do any kind of clinical. And, you know, and just being able to be there and to listen to them and to build the trust and help them down that path is just a very, very special thing. And you're helping everybody in the picture. So once again, thank you so much.
Thank you for those nice words. Thank you. And thank
You're
you
welcome.
for sharing. You just confirmed the whole reason for the book, right?
Yep. Yep. It's needed. It's very, very needed.
Yeah, you said it.
Thank you so much. It's very needed. Marcy, do you want to join us here? If you want to unmute yourself, please go ahead.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. So thank you again for being here. This is awesome to be able to chit chat with you. Love the books. They're so nice to be able to hand out to clients. So my question is, I am a newly certified end-of-life doula. So what kind of advice could you give if you had to give just a little bit of advice to someone starting out in this field?
You are starting out on an incredible journey. End of life doulas. When I look back on my, I'm trying to figure out how to say this and not get in trouble. When I look back on my life, when I started, there wasn't hospice Medicare certification. You know, most people couldn't even say the word. I was an end of life doula. What I did then was outside of the medical model, because the medical model viewed dying as a failure, death was a failure, and the medical model treated diseases that people had, where over here outside of the medical model, end of life works with people that have diseases. And our goal, as I said earlier, was to be with the patient and family at the moment of death. Hospice isn't doing that today. You, as an end-of-life doula, are picking up the banner, and you've got a huge responsibility of avoiding the trap that hospice got into in order to get reimbursed. I think the reason hospice became Medicare certified was so there was a stable source of reimbursement, but they lost a lot in that trade. And you got to figure out how to pay your grocer and do your work and not get caught up in the medical model, because dying isn't a medical event. Dying is a social communal event. You don't need a doctor. You don't need a nurse. You don't need any medical anything. You need someone who understands end of life. Now, that means understanding pain management at end of life and how the body works and all of that. But I see you as an end of life doula. Do I say as our redeemer? It's a huge responsibility that I'm putting on end of life doulas. And I mean, I work with many, 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 because really that's how I view myself. I see myself as an end of life doula rather than a registered nurse. So I don't have answers for you. I don't know. I can tell you, I've got time, don't I? Yeah. I can tell you what I'd like to see. I don't know that it'll ever happen, but my vision of how end-of-life doulas fit into hospice is this. Hospice hires end-of-life doulas on a salaried basis, not an hourly, because hourly you've got 40 hours and then time and a half. Salaried employees can work 20 hours or they can work 60 hours and they get paid the same thing. So you bring on end-of-life doulas. Those end-of-life doulas go on the initial admission with the nurse so that the program is explained, that this end-of-life doula is going to be your guide and your support during the hours, sometimes days, before death. So you've met, and then periodically during this time, and hopefully we've got a referral where we're talking at least weeks, but months would be great. Periodically, you're going to call that family and say, hi, I'm just checking in. I'm your doula. Tell me what's happening. I get report. I know what's happening with you. I just want you to know I'm here for you. When labor begins, then the end-of-life doula comes and stays as long as necessary and stays following the death until that funeral home comes and takes the body, because a lot of work and support and teaching is in that hour or two following the death. And so that's how I would do it if I could. Something to think about.
Thank you so much. No, that was great. I was a first responder before I came into this field. So I go from helping save lives now to the helping at the end of life. So, but that's where I felt like there was such a need. Like you said, those hours after death is so crucial. So
it is, and our families are alone. And I feel that as a huge hole in end-of-life care that hospice is not providing.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for asking.
Thank you too, Marcy. I have to say that one of the most unusual volunteers, she was wonderful, but her reason for volunteering was so unusual to me, similar to Marcy. She worked for, she was a forensic pathologist with the coroner's office, and she would see people sort of at their very worst, deaths that were kind of the worst kind of deaths. And she wanted to commit to making the best kind of deaths available for people. And so it was really, I felt so grateful that she came and did the training and continued her professional work, but then also could see for herself that there were other really beautiful ways that people could die, and very impactful. Rye Halpern here, who is one of our facilitators for our Elisabeth Kubler-Ross twice monthly death cafe, says, I love that you see yourself as an end-of-life doula. I am an end-of-life doula, and this inspires me. Kathy says, you're an end-of-life doula because of your capacity to be truly present for the individual and their loved ones. And Noriko, who is a lovely, let me see, Noriko, I'm going to guess that since you're asking this in the chat, you don't want me to spotlight you. So I will read your question here. Noriko is one of the, she's a nurse, a hospice nurse for Heinz Hospice, beautiful not-for-profit, who has been, she's going to come in and do some training in the women's prison when we start that program to train those women into end-of-life care. She's been supporting them for a number of years already. And her question is this: how would you approach a family who are in overwhelm and may not be able to pay attention to us, the medical staff, who want to speak about how the family is doing because they're probably so focused on how the patient is doing?
I think that we as human social beings are so used to being proper in our social skills that when we're working with a family, we tend to not be as direct as we need to be. I get asked a lot of how do you deal with families that don't want to believe that dad can't be fixed. Our job in working with end of life, whether it's hospice, whether it's an end of life doula, and I've got to add physicians there as well, who are dealing with end of life issues in patients. Our job is to address the elephants in the room, and nobody wants to address the elephants in the room. And so we skirt around it and try to say it without saying it. That's not our job. Our job is to be direct, gentle, but direct. And you can just say, you know, I know you don't want to hear this. I know you don't want to talk about it, but I am going to talk about it with you because you need to hear this. And we'll do it gently, but we need to do this. And I know you don't want to. And so you say it like it is, but gently.
Thank you so much. A is asking a question, and it's, would you elaborate on the duties of the end-of-life doula in the hours following the death of a patient?
Elaborate on the duties.
What an end-of-life doula might be doing, I think, and after the death has occurred.
Okay, I'm going to jump up before the death, and
Yeah.
I've got time. So
Yes, we have 30 more minutes if you'd
Okay.
like to take all of them. We've got plenty of time.
okay, now if I get sidetracked, you get me back on track. Our work when the person is hours to minutes before death, our work is to help that family have a sacred experience so that they will have a sacred memory that they'll carry with them forever. And how do we do that? We're like a conductor of an orchestra, and the family and everyone there are the instruments. And we stay in the background, but we guide them into us as we assess the dynamics and each individual's there. The person that's dying is in labor. They're so removed from their body that they're not our focus. The family is the focus that we're trying to get them to have this memorable experience. It's okay to get in bed with dad. It's okay to get the dog or the cat on the bed. You can talk and look at scrapbooks as you're dealing with this labor. So we're the orchestra creating this sacred experience. Following the death. Oh, so I'm going to say that part of our job there before the death is to get each significant person to go in alone and talk to the person that's dying. The person that's dying is so removed from their body, they're going to be non-responsive. Can be moving, but they're going to be non-responsive. You get each significant person to go in and sit with dad and say, you know, dad, remember when I was 12 and you took me out behind the garage and you beat the tar out of me? Shouldn't have done that. I'm 60 years old and that still hurts. You talk about the positive and you talk about the negative, and you get each family member to do that, to say their goodbyes. Dad dies. So the first thing you do is say, you know, everyone's there, say goodbye. And then how about you go out in the kitchen, fix a pot of coffee, and I'm going to tidy this room. And I'm going to get dad ready so that you can all come back in again before we call the funeral home, that you can come in and say goodbye again. So I send them out and I'm tidying. Sometimes you have to wash certain areas, get a clean sheet, maybe raise the head of the bed a little bit, and then position the body. Sometimes you got to do it with pillows because the head doesn't work real well. And then not have the overhead light on, but have a small light in the room. You've gotten rid of the bottles of medicine and all that. And then one by one, you bring the families in, one person at a time, and say goodbye. And there may be someone that says, oh, I'm scared, I don't want to go. No, I go with them then. Hey, I'll come in with you. But say goodbye, because this is going to be the last opportunity that you have in private to say goodbye. When all of that is done, then I call the funeral home. And while I'm waiting for the funeral home, we talk about the funeral. Now, most people today, it's a lot of memorial services. I personally, and I will encourage families to have visitations and have open caskets. It's helpful in our grieving to go up to that coffin and see Dad. Oh, Dad's dead. Where a memorial service with a picture, you can pretend he's in Hawaii. But to see him in that coffin, and visitations are for visiting. And so you've got the community support, where funerals and memorial services aren't really about visiting. They're sitting there listening to someone else talk about him instead of you being able to interact. So while we're waiting for the funeral home, I'm talking about funerals and visitations and grieving, and hospice has a great bereavement program. And 6 months from now, someone's going to invite you to a group and you're not going to want to go, but I'm telling you, if I have to come over, we're going, that kind of interaction. Now the funeral home comes. I'll say, how about I go in with the funeral home and I be your representative? You wait here in the living room because it's going to be hard to see this. I'll be your representative. And as soon as that funeral home gets the body out of the bed, I'm going to, if it's a hospital bed or a regular bed, I'm going to make that bed. I'm going to have the pillow. I'm going to have the sheets made nicely. I've already tidied the room, but now I'm tidying the bed. And I'm going to look around for something to put on that bed. I've taken pictures off the walls, literally, but often it's a rosary. Maybe I can find a flower, and I'm going to put it on the pillow. What I'm doing is creating a memorial in that room, because that room has a memory. And the next time they see that room, not in the dark, when I walk out of that room, I've got a small light on, because the memory of Dad dying is in that room. So the next time that family sees the room, after Dad's body's gone, after I'm gone, and they're all alone, is to be able to walk by that room and see a little light on and see the bed made with something special on the pillow. Their bereavement and their bereavement follow us up from us begins that moment. And then we've created a sacred moment, a sacred experience that will carry them as a sacred memory forever. That's my idea. I did it for years, and I hope that other people do that also. And that's why a death call, a pronouncement call that hospices often do, and you say, oh, well, it's, go in and pronounce them and it's 10 minutes. That's not what end of life care is about. It's about taking care of that family and setting them up to have a good memory.
Thank you.
You can tell I'm not passionate about this at all.
When you were speaking, I was thinking this family came back to me, one of the families we had cared for, and a volunteer who'd been a massage volunteer and had been going out to give massage. And then it became a time where the woman didn't want massage, but still wanted the volunteer to visit, which she continued to do. This woman had adopted 2 children when they were young and was very clear with the youngest one that the reason she adopted her was that when she was an older person and needed care, that she was going to be her caregiver.
Oh, geez.
And this woman lived with her whole life until about 10 years before she died, where she met the man of her dreams, and he married her and whisked her off to another town. And the patient didn't really forgive her for that. And so it was a very, she was the other daughter lived, I don't know, in Europe or somewhere pretty far away from California. So this daughter, it was really kind of up to her. And they had there was a lot of banging up against each other between this daughter and this mom. And on the day the woman died, the volunteer was there. And she called the daughter and said, I think you might, just might be a good time to come. And she came, and the volunteer had her arm around her mom. She had her hand on her chest. She was talking to her very close, on the chair, very like loving with her. And the daughter and her son came in the room and stood in the corner. And the volunteer realized they have no idea what to do. They just don't know. Mm-hmm. So she went over and she said, I want to just tell you some of the things that your mom shared with me. And she told her the stories that the mom had said about how they used to bake together, like really beautiful stories. And the daughter just started to weep. And she said, I think what your mom really needs now is not me sitting at her side, but you. And so she said, here's a way you can do this. Like, you don't have to like lift her head. You can just put your arm here a little bit. And sometimes it's nice just to put your hand on her chest, and just, if there's anything you want to say. And she got up, the husband sat on the other side. And she said she watched them for a few minutes. And then she said, what, I'm going to go now. And you call me if you need anything. 20 minutes later, they called. The husband called and said, she just died. And I want to thank you for changing everything about my wife's life. She thought her mom hated her. And to hear that she had said all of these beautiful things, all of those stories, that's not what she was saying to her daughter. And she always felt like she had disappointed her by marrying me. But here in these last 20 minutes of this woman's life, it was made okay. And thank you, because she died with her hand over her mother's heart. And that was just, she could never, if you had said that an hour and a half ago, she would have said, that's just never going to happen. So the way that you interact with the family to create the sacred moment, it changes everything. And I'm just so grateful to hear about this, and the importance of this. I think for people that may not know, it does change everything. And to take that time as a doula, if you have the time to take as a hospice professional, please take it.
Oh, that's what we're about. That's why need to be outside of the medical system. It isn't about the physical. It's about the emotional.
Yes.
That's our work, is addressing the emotional issues, and relationships that's what we're built upon. That's what makes us who we are, is our relationships with others. And it's not always happy. There is no perfect life. There's positive, there's negatives, there's easy, there's hard. And we who work in end of life can facilitate this interaction, but we've got to be there. We've got to be there. And we aren't always. I want you to be there.
There and be present. Don't be there and be thinking about the next 4 people you have to go visit, because everybody in the room knows that. I'm thinking, Barbara, when you're saying this about relationships, my mother and I probably had the most difficult relationship with anybody that I've had in my life. And at her death, which was unexpected, but the last 10 days of her life, I was able to be with her, doing like an overnight shift with her. I also realized that caring for your mother, no matter how many years you're in hospice, it doesn't matter. I must have called my friend who's a hospice nurse 4 times that night about, she's breathing like this, she's doing this. She's like, you teach this, Susan. I said, it doesn't matter. My mother's doing this. What am I supposed to do? She's like, well, you could just sit down in the chair and let it be okay. I'm like, oh, okay, I'll do that now. Goodbye. So it just, but everything changed in those 10 days. And I just made a point that if I'd spent 33 years doing end of life care and now my mother was dying, that I had to make a space for myself to be relating to her differently than before, if she was going to be different than before. And even if she wasn't, and she was so different, about 4 days into the process, my brother brought in this balm he was giving her and rubbing her with it. And I looked at it, I said, this has THC and CBD in it. And he goes, yes. I said, do you think that's why she's changed so much? He goes, we should have started this 40 years ago, but it could be. She became this loving, like, it was like we would come out of the room and go, is mom loving us now? We're like, yeah, I think that's what's happening. And it was just so interesting to have such a change in, you know, all those hospice stories that we had ever heard around our IDG meeting, that's how that can happen, you know, absolutely can happen. And just very grateful that enough people showed me the way for that to happen, that in the moment when it mattered, that's what showed up. So very grateful. There's a couple of people posting here about the work of doulas at the time of death. Rai is saying that other things that she's done is, sometimes families want to keep the body and the visitation can happen in the house. And that there's no hard and fast rules. You do not need to call the funeral home. In most states, you can keep the body in the home for as long as you would like to. And so that's something you could talk with your hospice program about, that there's been visitations with the body in the beautifully made bed, and people coming in and out of the house and supporting the family in that way before the body leaves. And then Diane has also posted, she's an end-of-life doula here in the Bay Area, that one of her things that gives her the most joy and comfort is really exactly what you described when the death happens, to be there for the family, to make the bed, to leave the room in a beautiful state, to really help them in that time right after the death has happened, navigate what they want to do and how they want to do this. Denise, if you would like to unmute, I will put you here in the spotlight. We don't see you on your camera. That might be.
Oh yeah. Okay. I have a disability, so
That's
I'm
okay.
trying to hold my camera, but I might
You
be
don't need.
shaking. I've been thinking about this for months, so I'm trying to make this as precise as possible. I've enjoyed the presentation. I have a question. I've been thinking about what I can do to help people who are dying or their families. Here's the situation I'm in. I happen to be a quadriplegic who can only move one arm, and I've been this way for 60 years or 62 years. I've been on my own, all that kind of yada yada stuff. So I know what it's like, and I know what it's like not to be able to move your body. With that being said, and having not expertise, but I've been trained by David Kessler how to help people through grief. With that little scenario that I gave you, do you see any areas where I can accent my experience to people who are dying or those who have experienced death? Because here's what I'm experiencing. I can't get into people's homes if I decide to work with people who are dying directly. I don't know how I don't know how families feel having to either talk on the phone or through Zoom. So, and I haven't reiterated the fact in my soul that it's okay to go into a place where someone lives who is dying. I'm getting close to there to say that it's okay, but I haven't quite reconciled that, okay? Because I also am in a hospital bed myself, okay? But I am mobile when people put me in my chair, all that stuff. So is there any kind of qualities that I can bring from my own experience to the hospice situation, either for the person who is dying or their families? Does that make sense?
I think so. I'll try here. I think that it probably won't work for you to go into the home because of the challenge of getting there. What I see you doing, if you felt comfortable, would be to help educate the volunteers, to help educate the staff of hospices on the challenges that people have. I think that you can be a great teacher to guide the staff of hospice and the volunteers of hospice.
Okay. Thank you.
I see that Patty has put up in the chat that Denise is such an incredible grief educator and one of the most inspirational human beings I have ever met. Denise, thank you so much for your the desire to help people, support people that are suffering. I just, and it's beautiful. And I think educating hospice staff, was having this conversation yesterday with somebody about how in the old days, we'd spend a lot of time learning about patient, you know, how it is to be, you know, work with somebody who's ill, whose body doesn't move the way ours does, how to communicate. And now it seems like most of the training is on how to use your tablet and how to use your software and what to do when you can't document because your tablet's down. And if you're not in a place without internet, what you can do, and all of that other really important information about here's a human being who's going through the most difficult experience of their life, surrounded by other people, probably in the same boat. And you show up at the door, and how are you going to be supportive and of service to them? So I really appreciate what Barbara's just said, and I hope that there's places where you're able to offer that, because I think it would be a beautiful, beautiful thing to offer to people.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, let's see. Somebody else I thought had their hand up here. No? Anybody else want to just unmute and share something? We have about 10 minutes left. Give it a moment here. Oh, good. Okay.
Well, if nobody else is, I would love to share the fact that Denise is not only an amazing grief educator and human being here on earth, but she's also an author. And her book is Forgive Me, Denise. It's Take Your Wings and Fly. Is that correct, Denise? Forgive me if I've misspoke. But I've read her book. I'm not very cognizant about the title, but, you know, being quadriplegic and actually being able to move one arm, she is one of the most active people, grief educators. She's out there. She's, you know, she's like, I think personally, I think she's one of David Kessler's greatest cheerleaders, if you will. But yeah, she's such an inspiration to me and so many of the grief educators that have gone through the certification process. So kudos to Denise, because whenever I'm approaching this thought of having a pity party for myself, I think of Denise and so many other people and the people that I work with. And, you know, I just, I sort of put my big girl panties on and, you know, pick myself up and try to do my best to keep moving forward. But yeah, thank you so much for this beautiful, incredible workshop and teaching. I very much appreciate the Elisabeth Kubler-Ross Foundation and all of you teachers here. Thank you.
Barbara, is there anything else that you'd like to share with us? Is there anything else you'd like to read to us? Maybe a parting thought to leave us with from any of your books or booklets?
Well, let me see. Where is, you all know the Henry, did you know that Henry Van Dyke is probably not the author? If you follow me on Facebook, I think I wrote a blog about it, didn't I? I did. Okay, this is the poem from the dementia book, but it's a cool poem. Don't know the author. Those we love don't go away. They walk beside us every day, unseen, unheard, but always near, still loved, still missed, and very dear. How sweet is that? Is that, I mean, that, yeah.
No,
I have had so much fun. I hope that I've left you with food for thought. I'm always available. I don't talk on the phone, but send me an email if I can help you in any way. Barbara@bkbooks.com. I'm, as I said earlier, that's what I'm on the planet for. So reach out to me if you need some help or support. And if you want to check my materials, go to my website. What's my website? bkbooks.com. How easy is that? So
I
thank
just
you.
put up, oh, go ahead, Barbara.
Thank you for inviting me. I hope you will invite me back. I really, I've had a great time. I hope you have too.
Thank you, Barbara. I just want to let people know that you will be getting, and Shira, I see your hand up. So we will, do you have time for a question here, Barbara?
Oh, sure.
Okay, and then we'll go ahead, Shira. I'm going to drop you down here and then I will give the business. I just want to tell people that, let me say this because I know some people might need to leave right on time, that we will be sending a Zoom link. Ken Ross will be putting that together as soon as the Zoom renders, and we will send that to you via an Eventbrite email, and I will include Barbara's, the book, the link to purchase the book is up in the chat. I will include a link to your website, Barbara, to your Facebook page, and to all of the other ways. And then up on, we will have it up on December 6th at 10 a.m. We will see Barbara and Gabby, who's actually here in the room. I asked her if she had any questions, she didn't. And so we'll see you on December 6th, and you all will get an email about that. So Shira, why don't you go ahead?
First of all, Barbara, let me honor you for the beautiful things that you've written and you've talked about tonight. I've also been one of Elisabeth's main staff people that I was with her for 12 years. So, but you've said some beautiful things. I do want to add a comment about to Denise. And I think you said a beautiful thing. Since she's done so much work, for her to be an educator would be super. And for her to do it through Zoom and Umani, because this way she could be all over the United States. And she would need to have somebody next to her, Denise, helping you in terms of working with the computer. But with the information that you have, the education that you have, being able to do it with the Zoom, you've got all over. And this way people get to know you. And if there's a question, maybe come back to you. But the bottom line of it is that, yes, to educate, I think that's beautiful, Barbara, that you said that. I'm just saying trying to think of a way, Denise, that would be helpful. I think Zoom or Umani would be a way that you might want to consider doing that. I think that would be Udmany, UDMEY. I don't know if I'm saying it correctly. I think that would be a beautiful thing for you to do. And I think it would make you feel wonderful also at the same time. So that's all I wanted to add. And thank you again, Barbara. I really enjoyed listening to you today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shira. Barbara, thank you. I look forward to spending my 65th birthday with you and with Gabby, and we will be sending out this email. I love that you said I don't talk on the phone because of our earlier conversation with Ken. So that makes sense. We don't have your number, and nor do we need it. But anyway, I just so appreciate this. For anybody that's with us tonight who is a caregiver, by profession or by virtue or by just accident, my hearts go out to you. And really, I would encourage you to take a look at the material that Barbara's put together. If possible, do self-care, which sounds like, why don't you send yourself to the moon? But it's such an important step. And thank you so much for being willing to care for somebody through the end of life. The more I do this kind of work, the more I'm convinced that the highest thing we can offer as another human being to another human being is being with them and witnessing their journey towards their death and supporting that in whatever way they would like to be supported. So Barbara, your work really paved the way to this. And Gabby put up that she's really looking forward to seeing you too. So thank you all on behalf of the Elisabeth Kubler-Ross Foundation. I will be turning off the recording. You'll all hear that. I will stay in the room. I don't believe Barbara's going to be able to do that, but I will stay in for a few moments. And I just want to thank, oops, I don't want to do that. That would end the meeting. I want to just thank you all, and we're going to stop the recording now.